Welcome to the Cincy Postcast. I'm your host, Kevin Wallace, and before we get into today's episode, I wanted to tell you about our sponsor, Cincy Shirts. Look, you know Cincy Shirts, you love Cincy Shirts. They've been with FC Cincinnati from the beginning, and we're just huge fans of their work here at the Post and happy to have them on as a sponsor. If you head on over to cincyshirts.com, that's Cincy with a Y, check out using the promo code ThePostCincy. That's all one word, all caps. You will get 10% off your order, and you let them know that we sent you there. They have MLS and MLSPA licensed FCC gear available online or in 2 retail locations in Hyde Park and Fort Mitchell. And the cool thing about the in-store locations, if they don't have your size on the shelf, they can print you one on the spot. Also, the promo code works in stores as long as you tell them. And that promo code is, again, ThePostCincy with a Y, all one word, all caps, or use the link down in the description of this podcast. And thank you so much to Cincy Shirts for sponsoring this episode. On this episode of the Postcast, well, we don't have a ton of FC Cincinnati content for you, but we do our best. If you can bear napkin talk. Anyway, in this one, we are talking a very quick FC Cincinnati news roundup about what is happening with the team, as well as some rumored changes to MLS roster rules. That's right. We go in deep on these proposed changes to MLS rules. To be clear, these are not official, but it is rumors that we are looking at a bunch of money coming into MLS. What will that mean for MLS rosters? And then over in part 2, we are looking at the Leagues Cup, everybody's favorite tournament on planet Earth. I was going to say when it comes to soccer, but it's with any sport. And we look ahead to the semifinals of that one, and that's going to be your Cincy Postcast. Joining me to talk about all of that and more, I've got 2 gentlemen here. I've got the Chief, I've got Grayson. And Chief, let me ask you this. This came up on a YouTube video I was watching earlier today. Can you name a brand name napkin?
Well,
I couldn't.
Sam's Choice?
I don't know if the store brand counts, because my instinct also was to do either Kroger or the Psst brand, which is where I go. The $1 for 100 napkins.
I mean, why would you ever buy napkins when if you're already reaching a point where you're going to be using a disposable napkin, a paper towel works just fine, right? I don't need to be getting in here fancy with the fancy actual paper napkins. The only time a paper napkin, I don't think the time I ever used them would probably be like if I grabbed too many at Chipotle and they just sit out for a couple of days on the coffee table.
I stuff my glove box with fast food and restaurant napkins. That is my go-to. My glove box is mostly Chipotle napkins. Grayson, are you able to name a brand name? I should probably Google one just so we can have one. But
I don't think so. I mean, like a napkin, when you said napkin, I thought you meant like a cloth napkin.
Yep, that would be nice.
So probably whatever the.
I bet Dixie. I bet Dixie has brand name napkins that go along with like the Dixie cups.
Dixie's probably our answer here. Chinette? Do they have a line?
Yeah, Chinette. Yeah.
These are other things that we know. We're just sort of hoping they have napkins, which I like.
But I'm with Chief though. Like a napkin is not a very useful paper product because it's not as good as a paper towel, but you can't like double it as toilet paper. So
that's true.
It's only got one possible use, and it's not great. It's not the best thing to use for the thing that you use it for.
Right.
The only reason to have napkins is so people when you host people, having napkins feels like you planned for it.
Right.
Like you were ready to host people because you had napkins, right? This is the, what is it? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Always
where you
remember your towel.
Always just have a towel.
Yeah.
Because it sends like a signal that like, oh, well, this person's not weird or whatever.
Well, no, it's kind of like having an actual napkin, like paper napkins. It's kind of like having a plastic wine glass where it's, yeah, I suppose it's better than just giving you a solo cup of wine, but it's
just for the listener at home. Grayson then immediately flashed a wine glass and took a sip. We can only assume it was not plastic, but
right.
This
it was
one
well
is from
timed.
this one's from Skeleton Root.
Okay.
I like a wide red wine glass.
Is it a legally acquired wine glass?
No, I bought it from Skeleton Root. Not a sponsor. Don't go there until they sponsor us.
Oh God.
Here we go again.
Sorry, Chief, I interrupted you.
You're so close. Like a napkin, it's classy. You have a napkin down on the table, but if you have like a paper napkin down on the table, you've almost like it's almost worse that you got just far enough and then didn't go the extra step to actually do it right. I don't know. There's nothing classy about a paper napkin.
It's the gift card as a gift of cutlery. It's you thought about it. You could have bought something if you just went a half a step above cash.
It's not classy, but it is prepared. It
I
is
like
like I went shopping for this party. Like, you guys are my friends. I'm not just pulling some paper towels off the roll on the wall for you guys. I bought napkins so you guys can keep your hands, clean and dry.
I bought
while
paper
you're eating
plates.
my watermelon salad. And
I bought the box of plastic cutlery that looks like silverware because it's silver in color.
Yes.
Like, I planned to have you guys over. I'm having a party. I went and I bought all these things because I'm middle class. I have a house, and this is what you do when you're middle class and you have a house.
I like to give people glass wine glasses. Like, I would never give them plastic.
That's a real I trust you.
I think it's I think it's confident. I think it's a little bit of a flex. Like, not only am I not making my friends drink out of plastic wine glasses, but I have sufficient wine glasses for my friends.
For enough people, yeah.
Yeah, and you just have to accept that there will be breaks.
Yeah, 2 of them are not coming back.
But that is like the demarcation point between like right out of college and actually being an adult, is that right out of college, it's paper plates all the time. You have whatever cups you've accumulated from a Reds game or go into a sporting event where you buy the souvenir soda. Maybe something you caught at a church festival or a parade or something like that. That all ends up in the cupboard. You have this amalgam of the, I got this from here, I got this from there, I stole this from the Hofbrauhaus. And then at some point in your life, you just sort of have to have a glow up where it's, okay, I have actual drinkware for people. I have actual things for people to use when they come over. And no one really tells you when that moment in your life is. It just becomes embarrassing if you pass it and you don't make the jump and everybody starts to judge you for some reason. Like, my wife was horrified when we met at the state of my ownership of cutlery, flatware, and things that a human being uses to eat.
Yeah, we didn't have matching glasses, matching plates, or like even really nice plates, matching silverware. And then you just get to a point and it's like, no, we're not only going to drink from glasses that were stolen at the various bars around Ohio State's campus.
Right.
Right. I imagine most people take the evolutionary path that I went. I can imagine 2 paths here. One is you get married, and you get married early enough to where like you need all this stuff. So it ends up on a registry. So that's always a good way. The other way is at some point you go to IKEA and you're like, oh my God, I can buy 6 wine glasses for $6. This is amazing. I'm going to look like an adult. And then slowly but surely, all of that stuff breaks. And hopefully, by the time it's all done, you're at a point in your life you can go somewhere slightly nicer than IKEA. But
there's occasionally in life you look back and realize, maybe my childhood, maybe my family wasn't as cool as I thought they were. Like, we had glassware in our house growing up that we'd gotten from Arby's. Like there was a promotion at Arby's growing up where they like for $2.99 you could get like drinkware. It didn't have Arby's on it anywhere, but it was like a glass that you got there. And we used that growing up. Like we went to Arby's a ton to get our glassware for the fucking house. Like we could have gone to Macy's. We could have gone anywhere. We got our glassware from a fast food restaurant. They're like these green tinted glasses. I remember them vividly, and they came from an Arby's.
I can do one somewhat similar. There was a line of Bengals glasses that I think were sold at local BPs in the mid 90s that my family ended up with like 6 of them. And that was a staple of our drinking as well. So gas station glasses right there with you.
To this day, my favorite coffee mug, and I like it because it's a little bigger than a normal coffee mug, but it's like narrow and just like taller, is a coffee mug I bought from the Ohio State University bookstore like the day of my graduation, and it was like on clearance, so it was really cheap, and it just has like the schedule and results from a wholly unremarkable Ohio State season. Like this is not like commemorating like a national championship season. This is commemorating like a 10-2 season.
It's pretty good. Yeah, this is fun.
Like nobody would have this. Nobody would have this mug.
Oh God. Well, if it isn't clear to the listeners at this point, all 12 of you, hello, welcome back. There still isn't much to talk about FC Cincinnati wise. So,
did you guys know that there's a thing called pasta plates?
Pasta plates?
Pasta plates?
We have pasta plates now.
Oh, okay.
They're like
those the shallow bowls. Yeah,
yes,
I've seen those.
They're like shallow, wide bowls.
Are there anti-pasta plates as well?
Probably. Those are bowls for sure.
I don't know. It's just another thing to put in the dishwasher. I don't have time for this. Like, just throw everything on a plate. I'm a slob. I'll just eat it all off the same thing. I don't care.
You know what ladies love? Plates that are like perfectly flat, but have like a really, really short like barrier all the way around the edge.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
folks, if you want to impress a woman, you're a single guy, get some of those plates from Crate and Barrel or West Elm.
Go wild,
you need
to
prove your worth with pasta bowls. Pasta bowls. When she sees it, you're establishing value.
Jesus, we're trending into dangerous.
Or ladies trying to impress ladies. Yeah, that's cool too.
You know,
I guess I assume they already have them.
That's a good point.
It's a weird subculture. I don't know if you've ever gotten in on this, but like, so I don't know if I've talked about this before on the podcast, but so I am on TikTok. I don't ever post anything on TikTok. I started an account, and
I'm surprised you hadn't told us, because you had to walk around your neighborhood telling all of your neighbors.
Yeah, legally you should have to tell us.
Megan's law requires me to inform you that I am a grown adult with a TikTok account. But the idea behind it was
just like the history explainers.
Yeah, the Reddit read threads. It's great. No, I just started scrolling, and I'm not following anyone. I'm not liking anyone. And the goal was to see how long it would take of just scrolling before my phone and the Chinese Communist Party got a read on what my interests were and what I'm into and things like that. It was alarmingly quick that we moved from girls dancing, not wearing a lot of clothing, to here's interesting information about Star Wars lore, and here's soccer highlights, and here's pro wrestling content. And it's like, oh shit, they figured me out real quick. But during the interim of the algorithm listening to me and, you know, using my phone as a spy device for various corporations overseas, I got into bro dating TikTok, where it was all these people talking about establishing worth and proving who you are and what women want. And then after that, it was, are you familiar with the concept of passport bros?
No.
Okay, so it's this really weird subculture where it's guys who have decided that the American dating scene is overrun with feminists and anti-male sentiments, and that the real thing to do is to travel abroad and date overseas, where the American man is exotic and you can live a higher lifestyle working a remote job, living in some place like Colombia or over in Southeast Asia or something like that. And let me tell you, it is the wildest place on the internet in terms of outrageous and ridiculous content. Just Passport Bros. Look it up. You will hate humanity just a little bit more after doing your research on this topic.
That was one of the plot lines in Love Actually. So I'm glad it's still alive and kicking in 2023.
Oh, you're right.
He's like, I'm an ugly British man, but if I go to Wisconsin, I'm suddenly exotic.
Well, it's inverse, and you can follow the exploits of various people 2 minutes of video at a time, set to really bad musical tracks. So, as the world slowly burns around us,
this is why, listener, it is important for you, a normal person, to travel. We can't let these guys be the only encounters that people across the globe have with Americans.
I would love a Peace Corps type civil action that we do as the United States, to just send normal people abroad for a week just to expose the world to normal Americans as opposed to whatever else comes over.
Right. Just a normal average American goes overseas, does all the perfectly normal tourist things, keeps a low profile, isn't, loud, isn't obnoxious, isn't barging around demanding everyone speak English to him. Just, we're going to send you the most normal people we have just to prove that not everyone in this country is a gun-toting hillbilly or some weirdo alpha male looking to get laid by pretending that he's a big shot at some company he's working remotely for.
There's one of the short films or short stories or vignettes, I guess is what you would call them, in Paris Je T'aime, is Margot Martindale as a newly retired postal worker goes to travel to Paris for the first time and does all of the normie things, and it's very nice. So we need every 64-year-old civil servant, career legal assistant, dental hygienist, anybody who's just been normal their whole life, lived in a regular house, made regular normal amounts of money, and is retired and now has some time on their hands to see the world. Yes. We need to conscript these people and send them off.
Here's the deal. We can save the government millions of dollars this way. When it comes time to collect Social Security, you can defer 1 year. And if you defer 1 year, you get an all-inclusive week paid vacation to one of 10, 15 locations.
The State Department is just picking areas where they've done survey data and they realize that the anti-American sentiment's a little high, not dangeously so.
Okay,
they're not targeting. Yeah, no. That's not like you're going to be
all
grabbed off the street.
Paid to Kabul.
You send people to Barcelona who don't know that who don't feel like they have to pronounce it Barcelona.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who would refuse?
You promise that when you go to Italy, you don't ask anyone where to get a pizza pie at. If you go to the UK, you are banned from calling anyone governor. You just have to, we have some rules. And if we find out you violate one of these on the trip, you're going to have to pay the money back. But it's just an idea. It's American normalcy. We are promoting the fact that there are normal people here, which becomes more important as just everyday news emerges from America. And I feel not to, get political, but maybe over the next calendar 18 months, it might be important to remind the world that not everyone is fucked up in this country.
Right, we got to dial up. We got to dial up the nice campaign. More people coming back from Italy and talking to their neighbors. Have you had mascarpone? Have you heard of this?
Can I have directions to the nearest Olive Garden here? I'm sure they're everywhere in Italy.
Right.
Had real fettuccine.
The buffalo cheese wasn't even spicy. It was weird. Wow. If that isn't a good intro to a podcast, I don't know what is. Gentlemen,
I mean,
should we...
it's only downhill from here when we realize how little happened with FC Cincinnati. So, I mean, fuck.
I was looking at the rundown here, and I'm making that up because we don't make rundowns. I've got like maybe 3 things to talk about here for FC Cincinnati. And one we did touch on in the last episode, but we should give it its moment right now. FC Cincinnati did re-sign or extend, I don't know how I'm supposed to phrase it. Alvis Powell is coming back with FC Cincinnati for 2 more years. I'm assuming Grayson has these details more readily.
Through 2025.
Okay, so 2 more years of Alvis Powell. We talked about this before, where Powell in this type of signing is one of those where, sure, you could probably imagine a better player, but in reality, Powell is very good at what he does, what this team needs him to do, and I'm happy he is here. I don't know. There's not a whole lot to say.
He was going to be a free agent. Alvis Powell was going to have a job next year.
Yeah.
Around MLS.
Yeah.
Like, so if he went into free agency, somebody would have signed him. Like, he's a player who there would have been a lot of interested teams around the league to sign. He's a very, very good, valuable piece on an MLS roster because what he brings you on his contract value.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the other thing too that's interesting about this deal is that so there's 2 parts of it. One is it's a good signing because he's a guy that's a floor raiser in that there's a minimum base level of contribution you'll get out of Alvis Powell where you don't need to worry about the level of performance on the field falling off a cliff when he's on there. And he's the exact kind of guy that FC Cincinnati was missing on during the Nykamp era, where they just didn't have quality bones on the team, and like the structure and the foundation of the house was kind of shit the entire time that they were there. And you were missing guys like Alvis Powell, Junior Moreno, guys who are just reliable MLS veterans that know how to play in the league and know how to competently give you minutes in the league. The other interesting aspect of this to me is that he's a value contract, and signing him now before any alterations to the MLS salary structure emerge, if you're a player's agent and you're negotiating a deal and the salary cap in MLS is X, then a fair deal for your player is probably whatever percentage of that, seems appropriate. If the salary cap were to increase by like 35, 40%, you as a player's agent might rightly say, well, my player should deserve some of that extra money because, well, you have more to spend now. So by getting, we're going to talk about this in a second here with the rumor on that, but by getting the deal done now, ahead of any increases in the salary cap, you are potentially saving yourself money that you might otherwise have had to pay to retain the services of a competent player like Alvis Powell. And other teams might have had the financial resources to do more than you, and they might have decided, I'll take my chances on the open market as opposed to re-signing here in Cincinnati. So I think it's a good bit of business in terms of the player, and I think it's a great bit of business in terms of the timing.
Yeah, could not agree more. You have another team in San Diego coming online soon, and who knows how much looser some of these free agency rules may become, or interleague cash transfers. Just the competitiveness for his services in the league could be more and more as these guys hit the free market. Also, I feel like we shouldn't overlook this when talking about Alvis Powell, or at least this is a fun opportunity to remember this. In 2019, Alvis Powell was on this team before he left for 2 years and then eventually made his way back. He was by my measure, amongst the fan base, the most hated player on the 2019 team. I'm willing to hear arguments for somebody being hated more, and certainly Darren Maddox made a run for it there at the end of the season. But I think overall, Alvis Powell got the most shit for that 2019 team. And man, he has so turned around his reputation in town. I wonder if people even remember that that's the same Alvis Powell that they spent an entire year being pissed at.
I don't think many people like to remember that 2019 happened. I think he also didn't play a lot of games in 2019 for FC Cincinnati. He only played in 13 games, only started 10.
Yeah.
So it's not like he was a major feature that people would remember as being there. I just was, and like I said, I've tried to block a lot of this out. He got cooked in that Seattle game pretty badly, right? And that was like everybody's first impression of Alvis Powell.
Absolutely. And what I find very funny about that game in particular is he is a right back in that game, as you'd imagine. What a lot of people don't remember is that the right winger on that side of the field during that game was Eric Alexander, who was a career backup journeyman defensive midfielder. Just like insane that Powell was stuck in that position. The year before joining us, he, I think, started the 2018 MLS Cup final. Like, he had a really good run with Portland going up to that point. So, yeah, he got burned in that game that everybody, including Koch, looked bad. Maybe only Bertone looked good coming out of that game. And, yeah, the fans just never forgave him after that.
Yeah, it turns out maybe the problem with Alvis Powell in 2019 was that Alan Koch was a terrible coach. That could in fact be the issue, and the roster construction was, we'll say, not great around him.
There haven't been a lot of guys on that team who were useful players after that, and Powell was one of the only ones.
Yeah,
who like went to like another MLS team, or in Hagelman's case has kind of shown his value. But like Powell went to Philly and was pretty good.
Miami for a year.
He went to Miami and then Philly. He went to Sudan.
All right, so
during COVID, I'm not going to count that. I don't know that he even made an appearance. Yeah,
he was good at Philly.
Yes, very good.
Like, I guess Victor Ulloa had some like, good minutes at Miami since then.
So here's the lineup for that game. Just a trip down memory lane.
I love that.
You had Fernando Adi up top with Roland Lamah, Corbin Bone, and Eric Alexander in the midfield.
Jesus.
Victor Ulloa. How soon we forget. Leo Bertone, and then along the back, Matthew Deplange, Kendall Waston, Nick Hagland, Alvis Powell, with Przemysław Titon in goal. Like, that's...
Alan Cruz on the bench, I want to say, which is controversial to me, and me alone, I think.
He didn't even make the bench in this game. The bench in this game was Darren Maddox, Kukuda Mane, Caleb Stanko, Forrest Lasso, Spencer Ritchie, Blake Smith, Manu Ledesma.
Blake Smith!
I totally forgot Blake Smith was on the MLS roster.
I think immediately after this game, he was loaned out to Pacific FC in the Canadian Premier League and then had his contract secretly bought out, and the league didn't hold it against us.
Sometimes there's like guys who are on bad teams and they get into a better situation, and it's like, oh well, they still got it.
Yeah,
there's like basically nobody from the 2019 roster.
No,
even like the guy who I thought was like gonna end up like crushing the league, Kenny Safe, has been like putzing around like former Soviet break-off states like since then.
I think he's the leading goal scorer in the South Ossetia Premier League.
I mean, just the back line in this game: Deplan, Waston, Hagland, and Powell. like, it's a wonder we didn't concede 11 goals in this game. I mean,
Wow,
we tried to.
You say that, but Kendall Waston is still a CONCACAF Champions League starting center back. Nick Hagglund's a starter on the record-breaking pace of FC Cincinnati, and Alvis Powell is a regular starter as well. We can really, truly blame this on Matthew Duplon, I think. Matthew Duplon.
We convinced ourselves ahead of this game too. Like, oh, we're gonna have
took the lead in this game.
Yeah.
Oh,
God, the
man.
midfield is terrible too. This is just
real bad.
Everything about this is bad.
The only other name I do want to say, Spencer Ritchie has had a useful MLS career. Not as high as it could have been.
That's true.
But a useful career.
Yeah, he's gotten time and won some games for both Seattle and Chicago.
Yeah.
How much would you pay for, like, if they had filmed a behind-the-scenes documentary about the roster building of FC Cincinnati ahead of 2019, how much would you pay for that footage to hear, like, you know, the justification for the moves that were made, or why they selected certain people, or what the coaching staff thought ahead of that season? Because it's beyond just being an expansion team. They brought in bad players. Like, you wonder, like, what were they looking at with some of these fucking guys?
I would rather see like a documentary about after FC. And it would be like one of those documentaries where they go to like a coal town right after the plant closed, and they're like look at all these men with nothing to do except for like spiral into addiction and,
Right.
and lose their
Drink and get in
houses.
fights.
Yeah.
We could, in a world where we were doing this professionally, a behind the spoon documentary where we catch up with all these players and they tell us a little bit about that season, but then, as you said, primarily what happened after that, what happened to their playing career. Ask Alvis Powell, and who else? What was it? Adi or Maddox also went with him to Sudan?
Maddox did.
Maddox went with him to Sudan. Yeah, just so many questions. Like, does Nazmi Abadawi, does he remember?
Maddox probably needed to find a place that didn't have like an extradition treaty with the United States.
With the United States tax enforcement.
So just to put this into perspective, so that was the first game of that season. This was the lineup they rolled out for the last game of that season.
Oh, I love this.
The draw to DC United. By the end of the year, it's Manu Ledesma up top, starting. In the midfield,
Yeah, build a statue for that guy.
In the midfield, Joe Zhao, Caleb Stanko, Fatai Alashe, Roland Lama. Midfielder Leo Bertone, and then the back line of Greg Garza, Nick Hagglund, Mikkel Vanderwerf, and Matthew Duplon. Teton still in goal. On the bench now, you've got Tommy McCabe, Kendall Waston, Andrew Gutman, some guy named Jimmy Haig.
Andrew Gutman was a good is still a good player.
Still a good player.
Forgot he was on this team.
Derek Etienne Jr. on the bench.
Still a good player.
Still a player.
Yeah.
Justin
For some
Hoyt,
reason, we just weren't interested in.
we didn't
makes
like
sense.
good players.
Won
We didn't
MLS
like
Cup the next year with Columbus.
We didn't pick up the option for Etienne. Yeah.
And then Rashawn Daly on the bench as well.
Roland Lamar took, I think, 2 years off. Somebody double check this at some way. He took 2 years off and then popped up for Memphis. This is someone who I think had a Belgian cap at one point in his career. Like,
he has 5 caps for Belgium.
Yeah.
Some teams he had played for before us are Anderlecht, Le Mans, Osasuna, Swansea City. And then he played for FC Dallas immediately before us.
Yeah.
And you're right. He didn't play in 2020. He played in 2021 for Memphis 901.
That's what it was.
So, interestingly enough, in this game, if I remember my history correctly, this was a game DC United had to win in order to get a home playoff game. And on the bench in this game, Luciano Acosta.
Oh, wow. I think he was at the peak of his pouting at this point where he was.
Was this the year that his failed transfer over to PSG? Would that have been this year? Or was it the.
That was that year, yeah. It was before that.
Yeah, I think he was
year.
He was done with DC at that point. Can't blame him. Yeah, good stuff. So the only other piece I have for FC Cincinnati news, specific FC Cincinnati news, is a couple of days old at this point, especially by the time you're listening to this. But Santi Arias back in the country, in case you were wondering. Andy's back in training. This all comes from Laurel Failer. Santos and Baji were off to the side, but still training. And Valenzuela appeared to be around training as well. He had picked up a quad injury. So slowly but surely, the entire team looks to be healthy and ready to go. We'll see what it looks like in another week. But in general, you like seeing everybody in the country, I assume, let's not ask too many questions, on the correct passports and or visas. And yeah, the guys who were not practicing and not training a couple of weeks ago are now starting to get back into training. This all leads me to believe that this team will be in good shape come the rest of this season, which is, let's hope, 12 to 13 games. So at least until the playoffs. Sorry.
Well, no, we want it to be a lot more than that.
Yeah, no.
So there's 11 MLS games.
At least one
semifinal
Open Cup game.
Hopefully one more Open Cup game after that. So that's 13 games before the playoffs. That's what we want.
13
before the playoffs.
And aren't we doing this
Shield.
like there's this fucked up playoff thing now where like it's best of 3 for the opening round of the playoffs? Is that what they're doing?
Opening rounds, best of 3, and then it's single elimination knockout with the highest seed hosting.
Well, there you go. So somebody else do math and tell me how many games we got left when we win an MLS Cup.
If we win MLS Cup, hang on, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 or 18,
Plus
depending
the 2,
on if we need the second game.
and then plus the Open Cup.
Yeah, that includes Open Cup.
Oh, that
Yeah,
includes Open Cup.
that's everything. So we'll play 17 or 18. 18 if we can't do our business in 2 matches in that opening round, which Lord help us if it is somehow Miami.
I don't even want to think about that. That's so far in the future. We're on to Columbus right now. We're not going to look past Columbus.
Yes. So that's all I have for FCC specific news. However, there was this little tidbit that I do think is worth bringing up here. There is no one, I'll say, large enough, super credible reporting this. However, this was making the rounds in the right places on the internet that I do think it's worth mentioning because this does feel realistic, at least. We've talked about this before. Messi coming to MLS could prompt changes to the salary structures, the salary rules, the roster building rules and mechanics. The rumor out there is, and this is pretty easy to follow on its face, MLS would add at least a 4th DP spot for all teams and a salary cap increase to $7 million. And if you're not familiar, that cap is right now just under or right at $5 million this year.
5.2.
5.2
this year. So quick, just to explain like the cap. So there's like the salary budget is 5.2 million.
Yep.
That doesn't include GAM or TAM. So like for this year, for example, it's $5.2 million salary budget, $1.9 million minimum of GAM, and just over $2.7 million of TAM. So like all in, your roster spend is like close to, it's like between $9 and $10 million.
Yeah.
And that doesn't include then designated player salary, U22 transfer fees. You know, that's why most of the teams are well north of that, because they pay, you know, designated players multiple millions of dollars a year, and they only hit the salary budget at $650,000.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the quick math here I was just trying to do. I think the max salary is tied to the cap, so I don't know exactly where that would go. But
the max salary is like what, 1.52, 1.53 million?
That's
That's
TAM.
with TAM. So
With TAM.
max
this
salary
gets
budget
weird.
charge is $650.
yeah.
It's what designated players hit at, and that is tied to a percentage of the so the maximum salary budget charge for a player shall be no more than 12.5% of the team's salary budget.
That makes sense.
So that's why this year it's $651,250. $651,250. And for 2024, it goes up to $683,750. And it goes up. So the current CBA goes to January 2028. So that maximum salary budget charge goes up every year because the salary budget is increasing every year through 2027. And then the number that Chief mentioned, the max TAM number, that's always going to be $1 million plus the maximum salary budget charge. And the reason that number is important, well, there's a few reasons it's important, but the main reason it's important is if a player's budget charge is under that number, you can use targeted allocation money to make them not take up a designated player slot. So like Matt Miazga is an example of a player who technically makes a salary that makes him eligible to be a designated player, but we use allocation money to buy down his budget charge so that he's not a designated player, so we can have instead Bupenza, Lucho, and Obi taking up those 3 spots.
Yeah. Yu
But
Kubo
in the alternative, if we hadn't landed Bupenza as a transfer, for example, they could have designated Matt Miazga as a DP and recouped the $1 million of TAM, which would then have been used to do other things. They could have traded that to acquire a player.
You can't trade TAM, but the point,
use it to acquire a player.
The general sentence, the general sentiment stands. You could use that TAM to pay a player's transfer fee or to sign another player who makes like $1 million.
Yeah. It's where GAM you can use anywhere. Anyway, you can trade it. You can use it to pay a transfer fee. You can use it to reduce the budget charge for a salary. TAM was specifically injected into MLS to acquire talent from outside of the league and bring it inside.
Which it's important to note that when you talk about MLS salaries and budget charges, for all players, the transfer fee is incorporated into the salary budget charge.
Yes.
So you might have a player who is making $2 million, for example. But if you spent $10 million in a transfer fee to get them, their salary budget charge is $2 million plus whatever the transfer fee is divided by the number of years in the contract he signs. I think 3 years is the amortization time.
It's over the full guaranteed term.
Right. So
of the contract.
So on a 4-year deal, it's $2.5 million since it's 10 divided by 4. So $2.5 million per year plus the actual salary they're being paid to get the salary budget number, which would be $4.5 million. And where that factors in is that you can have players in MLS where they are making under the DP threshold in terms of yearly salary, but since you had to spend money to acquire them, they then become designated players. That's what Wobodo is right now, if I'm correct. I think he's making under the DP. He's making under the amount for which you could buy him down off the DP contract, but because we had to spend money to acquire him, his salary is too high to buy down from a DP spot.
Obi's a really good example because he makes actually less base salary than Matt Miazga does.
Yeah.
But since they paid, I think it was like a $3 million transfer fee for him, and he had a 3-year contract. So you take the transfer fee plus, essentially their salary. There's a whole lot of other things that are supposed to be included as well. But basically,
any compensation is supposed to be rolled in there. Yeah.
So basically, anything that like the player's guaranteed to make over the guaranteed term of the contract, including like readily achievable individual bonuses, like stuff that you think they're basically going to qualify for. Like there's certain like performance bonuses and stuff, and you're like, yeah, this guy's an everyday starter, and he gets a bonus that kicks in after 10 starts. Like it would include that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you divide it by the guaranteed term of the contract. So we don't know what all the other little amounts are that like Obi might be getting paid, like if he gets like a car bonus or something. But so the easiest shorthand is to add the salary released by the MLSPA, the Players Association, to the transfer fee and divide it over the term of their contract. And that's going to be the player's salary budget charge. And if that number is above $651,000 this year, that player needs to be a DP, or you have to use like TAM to, you know, quote unquote, buy their contract down to bring them under the maximum budget charge, or they might also be a U22 player, which is if you have a player you sign when they're under the age of 22, you can spend as much of a transfer fee as you want, but you have to keep their salary under the maximum budget charge, which is $650,000. And that player gets a reduced budget charge depending on their age of either $150,000 or $200,000. But basically, like anybody who makes, you know, all in, including the transfer fee, more than the maximum salary budget charge, you have to find some mechanism to account for them.
And then the other thing too that's important to note about MLS contracts, which is something that like, so if they're putting everything on the table for rule changes in MLS, there are so many different things that they could do to make this league more interesting and a little more transparent. But one of the things that's important to note too is that like if you follow other leagues, especially the NFL, because it feels like most people, if you're a sports fan for the most part, the NFL is the one that most people have, I would say, the best knowledge of how all the contracts work. Unlike the NFL, you can't play with numbers on a year-to-year basis with deals in MLS. My understanding is, and Grayson, correct me if I'm wrong, that a player's contract, they have to make the same amount of money every year of the contract. You can't front load a contract or back load a contract, because otherwise you could take a guy like a Woboto or like a Matt Miazga, and you could say, okay, we have a DP spot open this year. We're going to pay you $10 million in year one because money doesn't matter on a DP. But then going forward, you're only going to make $500,000 per year in order to clear the DP spot. You can't do that in MLS. Every year of the contract has to be the same amount of salary.
Well, it's the budget charge is not going to change depending on what the player's salary fluctuation is year to year, because it's an average divided over the guaranteed term of the contract. So, for example, if you have a player who's making, let's say like no transfer fee, 3-year contract, the player is making $800,000 the first 2 years of the contract, and then the third year of the contract is making let's say $1 over max TAM. That player is going to be a TAM player all 3 years of their contract, because it's the average of the contract. So since they're under TAM the first 2 years enough to make the average below TAM, you do not have to make that player a designated player the third year of their contract.
Never thought about it that way.
Another example.
Yeah.
Another, though, is let's say you have the same player makes $800,000 the first 2 years of the contract. The third year of the contract, there's like some crazy escalator, so they're making $5 million. That player's a DP all 3 years. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Right. That's interesting, though. So you could hide a DP salary if you had a player willing to play ball and break it up over the course of 4 years, 5 years. For the first 2 years, they could be making over DP salary. But if they're willing to, or opposite, if they're willing to go cheap on some years and expensive in other years, you could, in theory, have multiple players making way more than the DP max.
Yeah, but you'd have to have a player. You'd have to have a player who you're like, I'm fine paying this player $1.8 million 3 years from now, but that player is also willing to make $800,000 this year. Like, I don't know that
Lucho.
I don't know that it would be. I don't know that it would be that advantageous to
probably not
game it out that way. Now, the real way to hide a DP is to do like
pixelate the genitalia.
So
thank you.
Let's say like let's say you had a player who was playing on a TAM salary through like 3 years, and then there was an option year for the fourth year, and it was like a $5 million salary. This would take a lot of trust,
right?
But the player plays out the 3 years. You trigger the option. You pay them the $5 million.
Then you use
your one-time. Yeah. You use your one-time buyout. But like you couldn't have an agreement with the player to do that, because that would be
right.
Because then if you had an agreement to do that,
that's a contract.
That's not an option. It's a contract. So then you need to account that for $5 million. But like, that's not too far off from what LAFC did with Bale.
Yeah.
I don't know the whole thing of it, but Bale had a really weird, his contract was structured in a very weird way where it was like a very short-term guarantee and a very high value option was going to kick in this summer.
Zlatan,
and I feel like he probably got paid
under the table a little bit.
Yeah.
Zlatan, I think, had a similar-ish thing where he came as a TAM player, which was insane given who he was. And then he became a full DP the next year later. But yeah, so what makes all of this interesting is, I mean, if you're not fascinated by...
If it's interesting at all.
Yeah, if you're not fascinated by MLS roster rules, sorry.
I'm getting dizzy and ready to pass out.
But a fourth DP spot and the salary cap, or the season budget charge, however you want to imagine it, moving to $7 million next year would be a pretty major shift for this league. So in the CBA, there is a sort of built-in escalation every year. I believe the league reserves the right to increase that whenever they would like. And according to that schedule, MLS shouldn't be at a $7 million cap until 2027. So jumping ahead next year has MLS moving basically 3 years ahead of schedule. And the league can add DPs whenever it wants, but adding one now would be a pretty big move. A lot of roster rules can't be changed on a whim because of the CBA. However, essentially the owners have the ability to add more money whenever they want.
Yeah,
the players aren't going to fight that.
They're not going to complain about that.
They might complain about international spots. It's probably the only place where you would maybe say that that's more money coming in, but the CBA is probably going to fight it. But yeah, so that would be a colossal change. I was doing the math over here. If you took the senior max now, like the threshold where above you have to be a DP or a TAM player, if you divide that out over a $7 million cap, that's about 11 players worth of max salary. That is a very different MLS next year.
Yeah. The maximum salary budget charge for 2027 is currently scheduled to be $883,438.
Yeah, essentially.
That's more than 200,000 more than it is this year. And it would be interesting if they just did the salary budget jump, or they just accelerated the 2027 plan.
Yeah.
Which you probably would have to get since this is in the collective bargaining agreement with the union, you probably need to bargain with the union over this and get their buy-in. But so right now, we already said the salary budget is just over $5.2 million. In 2027, it's going to be more than $7 million, or scheduled to be. In 2023, each team gets a minimum of $1.9 million of GAM. In 2027, that is scheduled to be more than $3.9 million of GAM. And then, interestingly, I think they're just trying to move away from TAM and move it over to GAM.
Yeah.
Which they should.
Currently, the TAM is $2.7 million. In 2027, it's going to be lower, just over $2 million. But like, you're looking at a $2 million jump in GAM and a slightly under $700,000 reduction of TAM. So that's net around a $1.3 million additional allocation money per team, on top of a nearly $2 million salary budget increase. I mean, these are significant moves.
Yeah.
And the reason why, of course, is
it's 40% salary budget increase, just about.
This news broke after we recorded as well, that Jorge Mas gave an interview where he said that subscribers on Apple TV have more than doubled since Lionel Messi joined the league.
About 2 million subscribers, based on what little bit of numbers have trickled out of Apple One Loop or whatever.
One infinite loop.
One infinite loop.
Yeah. OG Mac head right here. No, Grayson's right. This is a huge jump. But I feel like I would trade some of this just for simplification of the rule book.
Yeah.
Like, that's where this needs to go. Is it needs to be. We spent 10 minutes doing a breakdown of all the different machinations and ways that you can juggle money around and make money fit. Either simplify it, or conversely, open it wide up and let people do the NFL style shenanigans where you've got guys signed to deals where they're renegotiating deals to free up cap space this year so that your team can go for it, and then add 2 voidable years onto the end of that where, you're paying them money while they're off the books in order to make the roster fit during the year that you're actually competitive or that you're actually going for it. Like, open it up and let more games get played with stuff like this legally, as opposed to all this cloak and dagger shit that's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah. And a huge part of what makes it so hard to follow, in my mind, yes, all of this is very confusing, but the one key ingredient in all of this is the fact that GAM and TAM totals are not public. So you have no idea how much money your team actually has to work with, and you have no idea where that money is being allocated at any one time. So if you go look on Cincinnati Soccer Talk, Ken there has an incredible roster tracker for FCC. He does something that makes sense mostly. So if you look at where the GAM is being spent, you'll see that he tends to take off 100,000 here, 200,000 here for every player's salary cap hit. That isn't necessarily the case. That's a good educated guess, but the team could also be very well taking the hit on all of those and have a big pile of GAM sitting around waiting to do something with, trading for the rights of somebody or an international spot, something down the line. And all of these have different totals per year and they don't roll over. So that gets very weird. But the fact that those totals aren't public allows the league, and I think the league even says this in the CBA that they will do this, it lets the league inject teams with GAM and TAM without making it public and then letting those teams manipulate with it. It does have every team will receive a minimum thereof, but we do know that teams get more money for missing the playoffs as like a way to catch up. You get more money for making Champions League so that you can remain competitive with the rest of the region, and other things like they had never considered the Club World Cup when Seattle got there. There was no built-in escalator there, but there are ways where the league adds more of this money. So we've all said that Miami is cheating, or at least a lot of these moves look shady. It's very possible the league gave them $10 million in GAM, and everything they've done, with the exception of some of the weird buyouts, is completely legal because we have no insight as to what is actually happening with all of these moves. Very, very annoying.
But the problem, though, with that and with all this is that, so if the goal is to grow this league, there's two ways you grow this league. Number one is very straightforward, is that you spend more money and you attract better players. And by attracting better players and spending more money, you increase the interest that's being paid to the league because the product is simply better on the field. But I'd argue that because this is so opaque and because this is so, you need to study the rule book compulsively to understand how all this works. And even if you study the rulebook compulsively, you're still just making a guess at the end of the day. You miss out on what is a huge driver of interest in American sports, and that's fans attempting to track their team, track the roster, track the movement of players, and engaging with the product off the field on ideas for how teams should be built, what they should do, teams should do with their money, how their money should be spent, how money's been mismanaged. Fuck, the NFL never goes away because even when the league isn't playing games, people are obsessively talking about salary cap, contract renegotiations, cap space, trades, everything. The NBA never goes away because the Supermax deals and players moving around and making money appear and disappear in various places. People love this shit. The hot stove league in baseball was built on this idea of we're talking about players moving around and rosters being built. And in MLS, it's so hard to follow. I don't understand how most people would ever engage with this. Even if you wanted to do off-season content on Apple TV talking about comings and goings, silly season, that sort of thing, it's like, well, I think they can afford them, but I don't know. We don't know how much TAM or how much GAM they have left. So you can't even have a debate about whether or not somebody's a good use of money or it's a good spend.
Yeah, and I want to highlight that by pointing to a couple of sentences in the CBA that I think are just interesting. Okay. One is MLS retains discretion to lower a player's salary budget charge in individual cases.
What?
I did not know that was in there.
Now, I'm certain that if this has ever happened, they did not make it public.
Yeah.
Okay. But I thought that's an interesting tidbit.
Nick Hagelin is free.
Another tidbit that's probably more concretely relevant to right now is the amount and any restrictions placed on any money added to the player compensation spend prior to January 1st, 2023 shall be agreed upon by MLS and the MLSPA, which is again the players union. After that date, MLS may add to the player compensation spend either mandatory or discretionary after consultation with the MLSPA. Which means, subject to a couple of boring restrictions, and I do not want to get any more in the weeds on this right now than we have already gotten, because we're verging on I think losing listeners, not just this episode, but maybe permanently.
Very sorry.
What that means is that starting this year, MLS has a lot more power to just start adding resources that teams can spend on their roster, because they have to discuss it with the union, but the union doesn't have to actually agree to these changes. And there's reasons why this is going to sound counterintuitive, but believe me, it's not. There are reasons why the union would want to restrict the spend available to MLS teams in certain ways. And one of them, for example, is that additional resources are not necessarily to the advantage of the MLS Players Union's current membership.
Yes.
Because guys on, let's say, budget-friendly deals who are making up, back ends of rosters, but it's like, oh, this is a useful guy, and we only have to spend like X dollars on this spot. Well, if you had another $200,000 to spend on that spot, that guy might not be employed by you anymore.
And in the league, he may not have a spot.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's an interesting bit to this where, you do have to find that happy medium where the players union is looking out for current members. They're not particularly playing for the membership in 10 years from now, when essentially the entire playing roster right now will have moved on. And you also have, at least from what I remember, there's always this push and pull of the foreign members of the league don't tend to be as keen at the negotiating tables as the players union. I'm assuming players unions, should they exist in other parts of the world, aren't nearly as strong as we find them in the US.
Yeah, I think there's just FIFPro.
FIFPro. I think La Liga has a body of players that they negotiate with.
Yeah, I haven't looked into this very, very much. But the players, the whole union landscape that we have in American sports does seem to be unusual compared to professional sports.
Yeah.
Around the world, which is a shame, because in like Scandinavia, where they have like sectoral bargaining,
right,
you would have just like every professional athlete being part of the same union.
Right.
But it's funny.
Which makes more sense, really. But yeah.
that divide, though, is common among all American professional sports unions. I mean, it's the reason why the PGA Tour fractured, was because the players that were the top earners were being outvoted consistently by the players at the bottom of the tour. And then they were like, well, fuck you. We're going to go play for Saudi Arabia then, because they'll pay us what we think we're worth, because everyone's tuning in to watch us. They're not tuning in to watch the guy that's like 100th ranked on tour when the who gives a fuck open wherever. The MLB Players Association was the same way. They resisted adding the minor league players to the union forever, because it's like, well, no, they're not major league ball players. We like any money that we negotiate for them is less for us. We don't want them getting a raise.
Yeah.
And playing the highest earners against the average Joes is classic union busting behavior.
But you can imagine an MLS where there are 15 international roster spots where all these guys are getting paid an average of $600,000, $700,000 a year, where suddenly the concerns of, what your lunch pail MLSPA guy might be having right now are radically different in just 2 years. Like we just talked about how Alvis Powell's a great addition. In 2 years, he might look like a terrible addition given the amount of money floating around this league and the caliber of player available to MLS. They could be poaching Italy and France, and that player movement could very well be moving the opposite direction now that MLS is able to offer, competitive salaries.
Or it could just lead to salary inflation, where you still need to have a certain number of domestic players. You certainly need to have a certain number of players at each position. And an Alvis Powell, he may be valued at X right now, but when all the teams have more money to spend, he may be valued higher than that, given his experience in the league and how well he's played. But it's a roll of the dice either way.
But like if that happens, and this I think is something that is not fully appreciated when we talk about increasing roster spend in MLS. Just spending more money does not improve the league.
Right.
Like FC Cincinnati is not a better team tomorrow if you doubled every player's salary. Right?
I'd argue they get a little worse, but yeah.
They'd be happier.
No. I don't want to say, I want the players to make as much money as they can get. I'm not trying to reduce player pay, but that's just the reality, is like when you're advocating for higher spend,
You're advocating for different players.
Yeah, implicit in that if you're tying it to quality of the league. No, it's another thing if you have something like NWSL and you have players making, poverty wages, and you just think that they all deserve to make more money.
Yeah.
That's a separate issue.
Yeah, where they all have
what
second
people are
jobs.
talking about.
Yeah.
That's the separate issue for what people are talking about with increasing MLS spend. Presumably they want it to improve the quality of the league, which does mean, I'm sorry to say, in a lot of cases, different players.
At the very least, every team's bench is completely replaced. Like you make the argument for every team starting 11 on some level, but every single team's bench is completely replaced.
So let me ask this question then. This is more of a big picture thing on this. How much would you really notice $2 million extra dollars on a soccer field compared to what we're seeing right now in terms of like how much of a demonstrable difference in quality of play would that make? Because I'm guessing that the average Joe six-pack that shows up at an MLS game or a Josephine six-pack or what have you, not going to notice the difference between a team that's got a $7 million budget charge or salary budget and a team that's got a $5 million salary budget. At some point, the returns aren't perceptible enough, and the amount of money that you have to spend to really make a change is a lot higher than you're prepared to do.
So what that would look like for our team, let's everybody close your eyes and imagine
not if you're driving. If you're driving, maintain your eyes on the road.
But imagine like the best 11 that FC Cincinnati could field with current personnel. Okay. An extra $2 million probably gives you, I mean, there's a lot of ways you could do it, but a kind of the most obvious thing would be, okay, we have $1 million to spend on a center back and $1 million to spend on where Junior Moreno would typically be starting next to Obi. So we get like an Obi or close to level player in center back in replace of Nick Hagland and next to Obi in the midfield.
2 Obis in the midfield? My God.
Yeah. I mean, that's where you'd spend it, right?
Right.
Because like you have Barreal, Mosquera, Miazga, Arias, probably not in a hurry to replace any of those guys. Obi and Lucho in the midfield. You're not likely to improve. And then we have Bupenza and Vasquez at striker. That's a really, really good team.
It's a good team. I just don't know that it makes a demonstrable difference in terms of like, wow, MLS looks totally different now that we're spending all this extra money. It still is going to look like MLS. I don't know that it makes a huge difference.
Helps us apply pressure to Sergio Busquets.
Maybe.
No, I'm just looking at it from the point of view of like ownership. Like, is that $2 million really buying you viewers you wouldn't have otherwise had?
Oh, I don't know.
So I think where it becomes valuable is that MLS starts taking a leap up into the unquestionable top 10 leagues in the world. And at that pricing, you're not far off from the argument for being, say, the 7th best league in the world. And I think there is a tremendous value in being right there, where right now the Netherlands purchases all of our best players. The Belgian league is purchasing lots of our best players. Suddenly that talent transfer can start moving the other direction, and MLS has the ability to start poaching names that people recognize. And you're already starting to see that with like a Cucho Hernandez or a Sam Surridge, where like, or even Jurgen Locadia. Like, these are fringe Premier League guys that have been around the championship in the Premier League and are now suddenly very good MLS players. If every team is able to field 4 or 5 of those guys, days, the quality of MLS jumps so high that the MLS haters out there, they can't compete with it. The talent pipeline from South America starts making a major diversion to the U.S. You're already seeing a lot of that, but you could cut off that spigot of talent except for the highest of high ends. I think MLS could very quickly become a league of choice for viewers because of its position in the international calendar. It becomes the summer league. Everybody watches. Everybody has a name that they recognize. I think a lot of the world is culturally already prepared to adapt in some ways to US TV times. I think if MLS can make an argument for itself that it's a top 10 soccer league and you can watch it when most of your leagues aren't working or aren't running, I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah. I'd like to see it. The DP, the fourth DP spot is, I think, the big one because that's the one where, you are going to bring over the Cucho Hernandez. You are going to bring over the big name. I think that's adding the fourth DP to me is a much bigger deal than adding more to the budget charge. Like if you just combine adding the fourth DP with simplifying the roster rules, I think that would accomplish a lot of what you're saying already. But I hope it happens. Christ. I mean, if they're really making this much extra money on TV, they should start spreading some of that money around. And they got to strike while the iron's hot too. I mean, shit, they have 2 years, maybe less, to build a case to the world that's watching Messi that this league is worth following after he leaves.
I'd like to see that as well. And I think we're going to start to see that with more of these conversations. However, and I want to make sure these feet are still put to the fire, it doesn't happen if nothing changes, if they maintain their current schedule. There needs to be an increase in spend. There needs to be an increase. Like the Messi highlights are great and they'll be lovely for the rest of this year for the league. I'm not a huge fan of watching my team stare into those jaws of death, but this will be fun for a little bit, but at a certain point, if it goes on for 2 years, MLS looks bad. They look incapable of putting up a fight. The league looks discounted. Even if we all know it to be generally very good, it looks bad to an international audience, and that audience disappears as soon as the attraction is gone, as soon as Messi retires or moves to Argentina or whatever his post-Miami plan is. So, yeah, I completely agree. I think, well, let's wrap it up with this. I think there's a couple of rules that you could propose out there that would be very simple, very easy changes. I know a lot of people have suggested lots of things over the years. I like the idea of what do they call it? The bird dog rule, where you could have a Jesus Ferreira type and sign him to a DP contract, and that could be a fifth DP. It doesn't count as a DP spot because he came up through your academy. So that would allow you to prioritize maintaining homegrown talent. So Vasquez could stick around potentially, something along those lines. Guys with service, yeah.
Because that's the end game of MLS, is that there has to be, you have to, at some point, the league has to become a league where stars stay.
Yeah.
And you can build your team around a Brandon Vasquez, and kids can, like, there's never going to be an MLS, or if there is, they're not going to be great. Like, you're never going to have like the Joey Votto, where he plays his entire career with FC Cincinnati and is regarded as a Hall of Fame all-time player. That won't be the case so long as the dream of all young players is to go to Europe and get where all the best money is in Europe. Like, that has to change at some point. Maybe it doesn't in our lifetimes, and MLS settles into, a smaller scale somewhere in there. But I don't know.
I think you could do something like that. I know a lot of people have advocated, and I think we have as well. Just don't count the transfer fee. Just don't count that. Just put that out and let the transfer fee stand on its own. I also think, in general, replace the entire TAM mechanic or even the GAM mechanic, one of the two. Replace the GAM mechanic with a larger salary cap and let teams do cash transfers. It helps establish a more proper market for your domestic players, where a Paul Arriola can be transferred for $2 million here and $2 million there. So when a foreign team looks at a Paul Arriola, they go, oh, well, he has a transfer value of about $2 million the last two times he moved. It helps establish an actual value for your players internationally. I don't know. Do we have any
I like
other
that.
ideas? And I'm fine for like ridiculous rules as well. Don't feel like you have to take this seriously, but I think there's some easy changes here.
I think we should probably do like an off-season episode on like MLS roster rules and maybe come up with some proposals then. Maybe do it in like a more structured way.
I like that.
Yeah, and then maybe hopefully get someone on who understands the real rules and can tell us why all our made-up rules would never work.
Yeah.
Gerard Nightcamp, come on down. This would never work.
Time to finally release that Luke Sassano interview.
Sassano's who we got to get. He knew. Well, I think that's going to do it for... believe it or not, an FCC bit. Let's get on over to part 2 and let's talk a little Leagues Cup, as that did happen this past weekend. So let's jump over there. All right, we are back and we are talking your favorite, my favorite, our favorite soccer tournament, the Leagues Cup 2023. It is still weird to me that it is not officially ever coming back. So just something to keep an eye on as we go through this. I don't know. Is there a game in particular here that you gentlemen would like to dive into? We had the quarterfinals.
I'd like to give a special fuck you to LAFC for going up 2-0 when I had a non-insignificant amount of money wagered on them and then absolutely crapping the bed to lose 3-2. I went to bed convinced I was going to find money in my account the next morning, but no. Hurts.
That was a tough one. Yeah, they go up 2-0 in this one before Monterrey, who has done this a couple of times this tournament, just remembered, oh, right, we're really good at this, and just go on and win. All 3 of their goals coming after the 68th minute, which was a penalty there. Just a Monterrey-Miami final. Is that what we're looking at here? I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have Mexican teams totally knocked out of the tournament.
Yeah.
The only thing that I really enjoyed was the many attempts by Querétaro fans to draw lines that show that the Philly goal scorer, I think it was Donovan, was offside.
Yes.
And it's like, if only there was like a line right next to the player that you knew was exactly parallel with the end line that you could help like at least use as a starting point. Instead of just drawing lines straight up and down the picture. Like the picture is at a I mean, they're gonna make me become Andrew Wiebe.
They did not account for the lens distortion. No, nobody draws lines quite like Jonah does. And if you see lines out there that are not from Jonah or Joseph Mamay, question them, be highly suspicious of them. Those are the only 2 I trust in the business because they do a good job of looking at the end line, looking at the 18-yard line, and figuring out where all of the subsequent parallel lines would be from there.
And if you watch the replay and the line is correct, but the player appears to have been moved digitally, that's Alan Koch, and don't trust it.
Don't do that one either. Nashville absolutely smashed Minnesota 5-0, and similarly Miami dispatched Charlotte without, I feel like there was maybe 1 shot on goal from Charlotte. I don't remember anything other than that. Let me see. 1 big chance. Oh, okay. They give them 9 total shots, but 1 big chance, according to my favorite app, FOTMob here, which gives us August 15th. That is Tuesday night, Philadelphia, Miami, Monterrey, Nashville, Philly, Miami. Folks, if you want to beat Miami in the Open Cup, and we consider ourselves to be something of a Philadelphia-ish team, we are built in their image, This will provide the blueprint on how to win or how to lose. I think this is going to be tactically the most interesting match to watch because of all of the shit teams that Miami has played. Philly is the one team I don't expect them to give a sort of magical 10-foot force field bubble around Busquets and Messi. So, yeah, Grace, I know this is a matchup in particular you have been looking forward to.
Yeah. I just really wanted to get a chance to see Philly play Miami before we had to play Miami.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Messi has been as good or better as anybody had any, right to hope. But there was still the response, the but to all of it was that except for Dallas, which took them to penalties,
4-4.
They have not been playing very good teams.
No.
And Philly is somebody who, if Miami is not going to just run the table the rest of the way and win the Open Cup and win MLS Cup as an 8 seed, teams like Philly and us are going to have to show that they are capable of containing him and exploiting Miami's defense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if they beat Philadelphia,
panic. If Philadelphia looks halfway competent and they lose 3-1, panic. Feel free to panic.
Yeah, if it's a close loss or another penalty loss,
yeah, then
I'm feeling a little bit better. If Miami beats Philly 3-0, 2-0, 4-1. boy, am I not looking forward to the 23rd at that point.
Oh God!
It's like I said a couple weeks ago. Maybe they will win the Leagues Cup, and they will decide, okay, with that out of the way, our next focus needs to be making the playoffs in MLS, and we'll go ahead and we'll rest everyone. We won't let, Messi travel for that midweek game. I know everyone in Cincinnati will be disappointed not to see him after they've paid hundreds of dollars for tickets, but maybe that'll happen.
I think there was a headline in The Athletic that it was a Miami player or executive or coach just asking hypothetically, why can't we win everything? Like, oh boy. Oh
no. Oh, shit. Well, they can't win the Supporters Shield. I think they're mathematically eliminated already.
It feels right.
Yeah. Nobody fact checked that. Absolutely nobody fact checked that.
Honestly, if it's possible, I want to see it at this point. Fuck it.
Oh, fuck it. It should be a good game. And I agree with everything Grayson said here, that this would be a good test, at least to see where Miami is relative to, are they playing bad teams? Are they playing... do they really have another gear in them? Are they, whatever the case may be? Philly will be the best defense they've played all year. And Philly is also the best team to exploit their defense that they'll have played so far in this iteration. So, yeah, we're going to learn a lot one way or the other. And on the other side, Monterey versus Nashville. Boy,
how annoying is Nashville, huh?
Yeah. Is the worst possible outcome here a Miami-Nashville final?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We are all Monterey Union fans for this Tuesday, I think.
Right, because it's the two teams that joined MLS the year after us. One of them being guaranteed to win a trophy before us in a season where we are
so much
or
better.
At least have been clearly better than them.
And both will be guaranteed Champions League next year, just to rub it in.
Yeah.
Which is on the table for all of them. But yes. Oh my gosh. So
yeah, I need Miami to lose this game. Like, I really, really need Miami to lose.
So, and they've already rescheduled the game. So like the hope of them going this place, that place, irrelevant at this point. So prediction. I think we'd all like to see Miami lose. Do we actually think that happens on Tuesday?
I don't.
I don't.
Oh,
I don't.
No.
I'm saying for that game, that's going to be a 3-1 Miami win.
Oh my God, that's the worst one.
Yeah, Miami's gonna. I think Miami's gonna win.
Do they win cleanly, or is it like a hashtag rigged?
No, they
tournament?
win cleanly. They win cleanly.
And then on the other side, Monterey, Nashville. Again, I'd love Monterey to win this. Nashville has already beat Club America, already beat Cincinnati, arguably the two best teams in this tournament outside of Monterey.
Yeah.
They don't
I'm
do
gonna
it.
I'm gonna say Monterey.
It's gonna be Monterey, I think.
Monterey, they win late. They're just a better team than Nashville. I don't care. Just like fuck the analytics. The Manalytics say that Monterey should win this game. I'm going with that.
So I saw a tweet. Somebody said that Monterey and Tigres were something like 7-0 against MLS teams in this competition. And Monterey knocked out Tigres, obviously.
Yeah,
right.
1-0. Yeah.
So like, yeah, and I think Monterey takes Nashville. And honestly, like Monterey going up against Miami Messi in the League's Cup Finals is probably as good of a matchup as like the MLS and Liga MX and the tournament organizers could have hoped for. It's like their dream matchup.
Yeah, if you think that this tournament's been rigged, they wouldn't rig a Nashville-Miami final. It would be a Messi versus a Mexican team final.
Right. It's like the class of the continent against Messi.
Yeah. Against the class of the other continent, just a little further south.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Wow. That would be a Philadelphia-Nashville third place game. Winner goes to the Champions League. That would be interesting. I'd assume Philly'd be favorites there, but this season is weird. And then Monterey, Miami.
If Miami wins this game against Philly, I think you have to start genuinely worrying they're never going to lose again.
If Miami beats Philly and beats Monterey, man,
yeah,
like you
rotate versus Columbus, right?
Yeah, you can't say that they didn't earn it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And any questions about
are
these additions going to be enough to make Miami, the top team in the league?
Oh, that was already
out the window.
That's already proven as cope. That was all cope. But these additions aren't going to matter now. Like, no, if they win the League's Cup, it's existential crisis time for the entirety of FC Cincinnati's fan base. Like, oh my God, this is going to happen to us in our best year ever. Like, I am never going to financially recover from this.
Oh my God. It makes you worry about, like, what if all of this had happened a month earlier in the window and Miami had rattled off like 4 wins right before League's Cup? It'd be such a radically different table and feeling. Like,
maybe Philly will do their thing. Maybe Jim Curtin will come through. That would be neat.
It'd be nice.
Who do you think Pat Noonan's rooting for?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, obviously Philly, but like, I don't know. I bet there's part of you that's like, I want to see Miami beat Philly so I can see where the holes would be in our game plan.
Or you don't like piss Messi off. Like maybe if he keeps winning, he will become complacent and lose a match along the way.
We are the trap game.
Yeah. I don't like any of this.
Miami Nashville would be the worst. I'm just going back to that thought for a second.
That's far and away the worst. Yeah, no, we just any outcome but that is a win for me as a Cincinnati fan.
Nashville, Philadelphia would be a fun opportunity to become Philadelphia fans for a night.
Yeah.
Man.
It's going to be Miami, Nashville, isn't it?
So
It's
does
the
the
worst
crowd,
possible.
the crowd in Miami for a Miami Monterey final, let's say, do we finally get like Monterey fans, or do Monterey fans in Miami still root for Messi? How does that work?
I don't know. We'll find out.
I hope we find out, because that means Nashville's not there. The nightmare scenario has been avoided then at that point.
Oh God. Yeah. Oh geez. All right.
And there were people out there that said the League's Cup was worthless. And look at this. It's got us. We're not even in this tournament, and we're all panicking about a result that might happen.
Philadelphia Querétaro couldn't even start on time because the power went out. Like, this tournament has everything you could have ever hoped for. Just a wild, wild tournament. God, I hope they bring it back next year.
If you think so let's say Nashville and Miami both win. Do you think Nashville moves the final to their football stadium? Or tries to?
Sells all those tickets out?
I think you try to. Yeah.
Because you think about it, like, you'd have to figure out what kind of a payday you're getting out of it. And like the trade-off would be, okay, if we make a couple extra $1 million on this game, we'll invest it back into the club. It's just a fake trophy anyway. Like, who cares? Yeah. Would you be, all right, here, hypothetical situation. Would you be mad if FC Cincinnati would have moved this Open Cup game to Paul Brown Stadium if you had the knowledge for certain that every dollar of additional profit would be reinvested into a fourth DP next season?
No, I wouldn't be, but I think it changes it if you tell me every single extra ticket outside of 28,000 is rooting for Miami. That's a 68,000 seater stadium. That's 40,000 Miami / Messi fans you stuff in there. Whew, that's a lot.
There's a dollar value where it makes sense.
There is a dollar value where it makes sense. I will enjoy the game more in TQL Stadium than I would in Paul Brown Stadium, and it's not close.
See, the problem is the way that, like, that's just the way US soccer operates, which is they like the restricted nature of the capacity where they can charge a lot more. If you move it to Paul Brown, average price probably gets cut in third, right? That's not as much fun for them to tout $600 tickets or whatever on StubHub.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. Fun thought experiment at the very least, I think.
I know it's dumb.
if you could make enough money to where you could really make a splash signing next year, if you're gonna lose anyway, at least get fucking paid, right?
I know it's sacrilege, but like, I would like to see one game at Paul Brown Stadium if it meant the stadium was sold out. Like, I think that'd be a lot of fun for a Columbus Cincinnati Hell is Real match at Paul Brown and then back at Ohio Stadium. I don't know. There's a future where the sport is so popular where that would be lovely.
Now, really where you want to stay woke is if the subscriber numbers keep going up for all this stuff, is there a reality where MLS starts mandating that matches be moved to larger venues when Lionel Messi comes to town, and they start mandating you lose your home field advantage to sell the most amount of tickets possible while he's here?
Ooh, it'd be so funny to watch these MLS teams that spent so many years trying to get out of NFL stadiums being told they had to go back. Colorado's back at Mile High. Kansas City's back in Arrowhead. Like, no.
Columbus is at the Horseshoe again at Ohio Stadium.
We tried so hard to leave this. Correct me if I'm wrong. LAFC Monterey was at the Rose Bowl. Was there an Angel City game at BMO Stadium? I'm trying to remember what there
was a concert.
A concert.
There was a concert, or it was like a festival, like a music festival of some kind. And I don't think they had enough time to turn the field around.
Gotcha. That was fun. I liked that. That it was at the Rose Bowl. Made sense. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, see,
that's it for Leagues Cup.
What's funny too now is that if the final is Monterey Miami, MLS is going to wish they'd taken your idea of hosting this game in Vegas at a neutral site.
Vegas in particular would have cleaned up. I mean, hell, Hard Rock would make a lot of sense for that game, I think. I think he could do numbers there. I'm honestly surprised they didn't just move to Hard Rock, and maybe they do that next year. Drive Pink is already a temporary stadium. You have no loyalties there.
I believe they've talked about that being a thing, that being on the table.
Okay. It makes a lot more sense because, yeah, they're playing in a glorified high school football stadium that, like, St. X in a lot of schools in Texas would scoff at as a stadium. So, oh, God. Was there anything else on Leagues Cup, or can we end this podcast?
Yeah, let's get out of here.
We've already. You know what? I'm going to end this podcast on a positive note, if you'll allow me. Will you indulge me for a second?
I will.
Miami is going to lose. The Philly system is going to triumph. Jim Curtin will give his trainee, who has in many ways surpassed the master at this point, will give him the blueprint to beat Lionel Messi. Nashville will get stabbed, curb stomped, and drummed out of the tournament by Monterrey. It'll be Philly versus Monterrey. It will piss off every single person at Apple, at MLS headquarters. Their rigging attempts will not work. It's going to be fine. I'm talking myself into this. But regardless, fuck Columbus.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Cincy Postcast, which is a production of The Post Cincy. You can check us out at thepostcincy.com for all of our written content, as well as links to our social media. You can follow us on Twitter, and as well, you can join us on our Discord server. You can find links to that server both in this episode description as well as on our website. That is where most of our conversations are going on. We have a lovely community there talking about FC Cincinnati, MLS, anything and everything else and everything in between. We also want to give a huge thanks to Jim Trace and the Makers for providing all of the music you've heard throughout this episode. They're an amazing local Cincinnati band. Again, more information about them is in the description of this episode. And if you enjoyed what you listened to and you've made it to the end, so I'm going to assume you liked it, or you just can't reach your stop button, please like us, review us, subscribe to us wherever you are getting your podcasts. That is going to be really, really helpful. But more importantly, share this with a friend. A personal recommendation helps spread a podcast so much further. So please share this if you know somebody in your life who's an FC Cincinnati fan, an MLS fan, somebody that you think would enjoy this. Pass it on over. Thank you so much again for listening. It blows me away that people continue to listen to us, and thank you so much again.